It is a Saturday in the summer of 1955, and you are 12 years old. You've got a couple of dollars in your pocket, and you ride the Western Avenue streetcar north, and the whole way there, the anticipation builds because you can already see it over the rooftops, a lattice of white wooden tracks scratched against the sky. You get off at Belmont. You walk under a gate built like a castle, and the smell hits you all at once. Cotton candy, popcorn, river water, machine grease. A band organ is playing somewhere. Above you, a wooden coaster is roaring, and people are screaming, and you can feel it in your chest before you've spent a dime. This is Riverview. 74 acres of it packed between Belmont, Western Avenue, the North Branch of the Chicago River, and Lane Tech High School. The sign over the gate makes a promise: laugh your troubles away. For 64 years, Chicago did. Roughly 200 million people came through that gate. If you grew up in this city in the first half of the 20th century, Riverview wasn't an outing. It was a rite of passage, your first roller coaster, your first kiss in the tunnel of love, your first real, genuine fear. And then, one October morning in 1967, Chicagoans opened the Tribune and learned it was gone, not closing, gone. Sold, finished, never reopening. No farewell season, no last ride on the Bobs. One man who grew up going there described it later as someone flipping a light switch. On a Friday, it was the center of your childhood, and then it simply wasn't there anymore. To understand how that happens, you have to go back to a German rifle club. In the late 1800s, the land at Western and Belmont was a private shooting club called Schützen Park, also known as Sharpshooters Park, and it sat in the middle of a heavily German North Side neighborhood. One of its members was a real estate man named William Schmidt. When the club dissolved, Schmidt and a few partners bought the grounds and rented them out for picnics. Then his son George took a trip to Europe. In 1903, George Schmidt visited the great pleasure gardens of the Old World, Tivoli in Copenhagen, the Prater in Vienna, and came home convinced that working-class Chicago deserved one of its own. The family cleared the trees off the eastern edge of the picnic grove, put in rides, and on July 2, 1904, opened Riverview Park. It grew fast. In 1908, they installed a carousel with 72 horses, hand-carved by Swiss and Italian immigrant woodworkers, a 96-passenger machine under a canopy shaped like a wedding cake. By the 1920s, Riverview was one of the largest amusement parks in the country, and the Schmidts kept building. The crown jewel arrived in 1924. The Bobs, a wooden roller coaster designed by Frederick Church, was 65 feet tall, with a first drop of nearly 60 feet, and turned so steep and so violent that riders swore it was trying to throw them clear of the track. It was advertised as the fastest coaster on Earth, clocked at more than 60 miles an hour. Engineers who later studied the original blueprints put the real top speed closer to 50 miles an hour. It didn't matter. The Bobs was the dare. When your turn came, you climbed into a little open car with one lap bar, and the chain hauled you up that first hill slowly enough to make you reconsider every decision that had led you there. Then it let go. The Bobs had no loops. 1920s coasters did not. It had speed and angle and a track that snapped left when your whole body wanted to keep going right. For 90 seconds you were certain you were about to die, and when it was over, you got right back in line. And the Bobs was just one ride in a city of them. There was the parachutes, a 200-foot parachute drop that hauled you to the top and let you fall, famous enough that the Beach Boys name-checked it in a 1965 song. There was Aladdin's Castle, the funhouse with its collapsing staircase, its turning barrel, and a giant grinning face over the door, the chute the chutes, the tunnel of love, the flying turns, the comet, the silver flash, the fireball. There was a half-mile midway called the Bowery, lined with shooting galleries and games, a ballroom for dancing, fireworks over the river. On a hot summer night, the place could hold tens of thousands of people, and the wooden towers of the coasters lit up against the dark like a skyline of their own. It was cheap, built on the same idea as the great movie palaces across town. The idea was that a factory family with a few coins could buy an afternoon of being somewhere else. But Riverview was also a mirror of the city around it, and some of what it reflected was ugly. For more than half a century, one of the midway concessions was a dunk tank game. The man on the perch, taunting passers-by to throw, was always a black man. The people lined up to throw were white. The man was never the one holding the balls, and he was never not the target. The game was originally advertised under a racial slur, later softened to the African dip, and finally just the dip. It ran at Riverview from 1909 until 1964, when, as the civil rights movement crested in Chicago and the park began to fear a boycott, it was quietly pulled. The columnist Mike Royko reported its removal. For 55 years, the promise over the gate had not applied to everyone equally. By the mid-1960s, the park was in trouble, and the trouble was mostly arithmetic. Riverview's property taxes climbed every year. The wooden rides, some of them 40 and 50 years old, cost more and more to inspect and maintain. Attendance was sliding. The dense streetcar neighborhoods that had filled the place every summer were emptying toward the suburbs in a decade when American cities were increasingly painted as dirty and dangerous. And the 74 acres the park sat on, close to the river and the new expressways, were suddenly worth far more as raw real estate than as a place to ride the bobs. So the Schmidt family did the math, and after the 1967 season, they sold. The land went for more than $6.8 million, and the founder's grandson always insisted the real figure was higher than what got printed. The buyers wanted the dirt, not the park. There was no warning, no final summer, no chance to say goodbye. That was the part that wounded people the most. After the closing, the owners held an auction for the rides themselves, and out of around 50 bidders, nobody wanted them. Not the parachutes, not the parachute jump, not even the bobs, the most famous roller coaster in America. The Jetstream coaster had been built just 3 years earlier, in 1964, and it wasn't even paid off when the wrecking crews arrived. In 1968, they tore all of it down and smashed most of it into scrap. Today, if you stand at Belmont and Western, where 200 million people once walked under a castle gate to laugh their troubles away, you'll find a strip mall anchored by a Mariano's grocery store. The rest of the 74 acres holds a police station, a DeVry campus, a Catholic high school, and a dental equipment factory. There's a city park on the north end, and if you know where to look in the trees, you can still find concrete ride foundations sinking into the dirt. The traffic overpass the city, built in the 60s just to handle the Riverview crowds, outlived the park by nearly 50 years before it, too, came down. And the carousel, the one with the 72 hand-carved horses, still turns every single day. You just have to drive 600 miles to ride it. It's been spinning at Six Flags Over Georgia, outside Atlanta, since 1971. The sign over the gate said, "Laugh your troubles away." 200 million Chicagoans walked under it and did exactly that for 64 years. Then one October morning, somebody flipped the switch. The gate came down, the bobs became a parking lot, and the only piece of Riverview still turning is 600 miles south, full of horses that Chicago carved and Chicago lost.